Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm very happy to have you here in this class, which is called Critical Text Analysis. From September onwards, we've been trying to understand what it means to be a good journalist, to be a critical journalist, what it means to be critical, from which perspective you decide to judge texts and also audiovisual material. We've been trying to understand what it means to be part of an argumentative situation. We're always part in some argumentative situation, and how as a journalist can you be there, how can you function, can you be objective, can you be neutral? What does it mean when you say you're objective, you're neutral? Does that mean that you're part of some professional institution? What does that have to do with your own personality? So there are a lot of questions. And in this course we focus on two big domains, the domain of argumentation and the domain of narration. Argumentation in this sense that as a journalist you're always part of this, as I told you, argumentative situation. And it's important to understand your position and the position of others, especially in conflicts, in war, which are everywhere. You're always part of conflicts of war. You're always at some side, whether you decide it or not. And also, so that's the argumentative part. And the other part is the narration. As a journalist, you're always telling stories. You're always telling stories, and it's important to know how you, how your perspective on the stories is, what stories you are telling, what stories you don't tell. And it's also important to learn how to tell a good story in a good way. So those things we've been working around, we've been reading a lot, we've been discussing a lot. So, and when my colleagues decided, well, in their project, invited you, I looked at your website and I thought, well, that's exactly the man we need, the right man on the right place at the right time. So because I read that you're a provocative filmmaker.
Well,
that's what you said.
provocative person.
Or you're interested in provocative filmmaking.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested in getting at some kind of truth, as you say, which I think is always provocative in some way, depending on what the situation is. But no.
Yes, okay. Indeed. Indeed. I'm happy to hear that. So I read you're into active cinema of exploration and social and human consciousness and responsibility, and you're also, from that responsibility, you're also teaching and giving workshops, because that's part of that responsibility, I understand. And I think you also see it as an empowerment for people, for journalists, but also for the public in general, to talk about other ways of making movies, other ways of telling stories.
Exactly.
So
you'll fall asleep if you look at that. That's my screen. This is my computer. I think I'll stop that.
So, when I read that you're into a cinematographic project that changes our perception of film, opening access to the creation of short films to anyone who wishes to participate, and you explore the possible scenarios of a better world through the knowledge and practice of universal values such as tolerance, respect, and freedom, I think I just want to listen to what you will be saying now, and the only thing I can add is the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, it's great to see so many people. I usually give much smaller classes or much smaller workshops, to be honest, so it's really good to see everybody here. Just a little bit about my background. I've always been, well, I consider myself to be a working filmmaker. I mean, but I've done many other things during my professional development. I started as a, but now I see that they're all connected in some way. It's very difficult for me to separate really one from the other. I started as a kind of young photojournalist. I mean, I was really interested in photography when I was very young, like 13, 14, 15, and I eventually went to study photography in London, and there I discovered making films, because we had to make. It was a film and photography school, and the first year we did film and photography, and then I discovered moving images, and I was just fascinated by this process. I'm talking about when before video. It's not that long ago. It's like the 1980s, but we didn't have video cameras. We did everything on film. For your generation, it's like something from a museum, like celluloid film. But we were working on constructing films in that way. And then when I left film school, I became a film editor, because I consider myself to be a film editor. That's really, if somebody says, "What are you?" I say, "Well, I'm a film editor." But I do other things in film now. I produce films, I develop projects, I film, I actually shoot videos as well, and design sound as well, which I see as a very important part of my project. Of projects, audiovisual projects, because they're audiovisual. The audio part is often very neglected. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that today, about how we express things, not just through images, but through sounds. In this context, it's not something which normally people do in television, I have to say, working in the way that I work with sounds, but I'll talk about that a bit later. And then, after editing films for maybe 10 or 12 years in London, I was working at the BBC for many years, doing one film after another, I began to feel really disconnected from reality in a kind of way, because you begin to see everything through the screen, and I wanted to go out and do things and actually meet people, and well, things were happening, and I at that time it was the early middle 90s. The biggest thing for me happening in Europe was the conflict in Yugoslavia, and one thing led to another. I got involved in that conflict, and I started going to Bosnia before the end of the war, and then I tried to make a film in Bosnia. Strangely enough, after the end of the war, I tried to make a documentary there, very kind of art documentary, not really journalism, but there were a group of people trying to put on a Shakespeare play in a destroyed town, A Midsummer Night's Dream. And I thought, wow, this would be a great film to make. So I went there trying to make this film. It was just impossible. And then, curiously, I had an idea for a book. And somebody said to me, wow, that's a great idea. I'll give you the money to research it. So my career went in another direction. I started thinking about graphic design, because it was a book about graphic design during the war. And writing, I'd never written anything, really. I'd never written anything since I was in school. And I thought, okay, well, I can do this. I have the emotional capacity and the intellectual interest to do it, so I just decided to do it. So I went in another direction, and eventually, then I went to Palestine to write a book about graphic design in Palestine. And by a curious route, I came back into film, and now here I am. So I did a big kind of tour, of various journalistic, I suppose you would call them, disciplines. And then I was actually writing journalism in a while in Mexico for a magazine in England. I was writing in Mexico about art and design. And my partner is a very, very important part of my wife, and my creative partner is Carolina. It's a great pity that she's not here today, but she's in Spain at the moment. Because I really have to mention her right here in the front of this lecture, because Carolina and I work in a very symbiotic way, and many of these ideas are Carolina's, and many of the ideas are mine. I can't remember which are hers and which are mine now, but because it's just very, very closely knit together. But in the development of these films, these video valores films, there's a very clear line between what Carolina does and what I do. She really works with the students. Well, when I say students, as Hilda said, the people who make, I mean, we have made some of these films. Carolina and I have our own personal films, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. But most of these video valores films, and I will explain in a minute in detail what this is, what this concept is. But most of these films are made by young people, or older people, or even children, who've never made a film before in their lives. Most of them have been made by people who've never done anything serious. Maybe they filmed their cat or their grandmother or whatever, you know, put it on YouTube. But they've never developed anything of this philosophical, psychological, and artistic complexity. So so we work with, now we're doing 6 new films with 6 people in Spain who are all over the age of 50 at least. One of them is like 70 years old, and she's never even touched a camera before. So, but these are people who want to express something. So we work with them, giving them the tools, the mental tools, and then working with them on the construction of their film. So Carolina Rivas, she works with the students right at the beginning, and I really stay back. I really don't get involved in that. And what she does is really very mysterious. I still don't really understand how she does it, to be quite honest. But she has some psychological, she has a methodology which she uses, and I'll tell you more about this in the presentation in a second. She has a methodology to get inside the person, and so that the person can explore their own personal psychology and their own personal interests, and find a way to bring that out and put it on the screen. Now that's not easy to do. I mean, it's difficult to do in a long film, and these films are very short. You have to remember these films are microfilms. These are like trying to express the maximum in the minimum duration of time. So Carolina, doing that is not easy either. It's another kind of discipline. Making long films, we can see one of our long films today, but making short films is a very, it's obviously, it sounds easy to make a 1-minute film or a 2-minute film, but if you want to express something universal, and you want to express something which people can understand, but is not obvious at the same time, that's poetic and also realistic, it's quite difficult to do. So for the students, it's a big challenge. Next year, well, let me start with a little bit more formally, because I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit. I'd like to, the structure of today is going to be a little bit dynamic, I hope. I'm going to just go through a verbal presentation, a kind of PowerPoint type thing, and kind of read it together. Anytime, if anybody has any questions, not just at the end, but any time. I know time is limited, but we have to be careful here because I've got a lot of ambitious ideas. But if anybody has any questions at any point, you could. Do you all understand my English? Okay. Is it fun? I mean, I'm English, but I just wonder whether I'm speaking too fast or anything. No? It's incredible that you all speak English. I can't believe it. I live in Spain and nobody speaks any. Nobody speaks a word of English. I'll go through this presentation. The presentation. First, the presentation. Then I'd like to show you 6 short films, which is the last edition of this project. We do this project in different cities. We did it in Berlin last summer, and we produced 6 films there. which are all very interesting, I think. And luckily, I still have the original editing timelines. Some of you have edited video, I imagine, yeah? Okay, so I'm going to open the timelines. After we see the films, I'm going to open the timelines and explore a little bit the construction of the films and how they were put together, and some of the choices that I made or we made. And then, so that's like the Berlin side of things. And then in a little bit later, obviously after lunch, no, not after lunch, after like 12 o'clock, I'm going to show you an original piece of material which was actually filmed by Carolina, an original piece of video which is about 8 or 9 minutes long. It's nothing really complex, it's one shot. But from that shot, we made a very, very nice little video value, no? We made, and I'd like to try to edit that quickly in a timeline in Adobe Premiere to show you how that kind of thing was put together, how it was articulated, and how, as a working film editor, which is what I am, how I kind of think that thing through. And then a little bit of the development of the sound, just to understand that the sound is an important part of the process. So let me just go through this. I don't want to take... you have to be patient because I've got to open various documents, otherwise it's... Okay. These are all grabs. These are all photos from different films, you know, that we've made over the years for this project. Okay, Video Valores is an innovative, contemporary, poetic, philosophic film project that changes our perspective of making and viewing short films. Changes our perspective. Why does it change our perspective? Well. Generally, short films are generally short. A short film normally means, if you talk about short, normally it doesn't mean 1 or 2 minutes. It means like 10 minutes and quite a complex narrative line. Our idea of making these films originally was to make like advertising for human values. We imagined that these were films that you could show in public spaces, on the metro, because in Spain they have video, I don't know about here, but they have little screens on the metro and on the buses. So we thought, okay, it's a film you can watch between 2 stations, a complete film, you know, and you receive a humanistic message in as short amount of time as possible. I have to say that the shortest films that have ever been made in this have been made by Carolina and me. I don't know why that is. For the students, very often it's very difficult to synthesize an idea in exactly 60 seconds, for example. They usually need more time, and the films usually come out a bit longer. I mean, you can't, as an editor, you can't impose too much on the material. You have to let the material breathe. You have to let the material speak. If you try to over-control it, you can destroy it. So, but in our own work, I was very, very, because I'm like a really compulsive person. I tried. I thought, okay, it's going to be 60 seconds and not 1 frame or not 1 second longer and not 1 second shorter. So I have these little films which are exactly 60 seconds. But that's what it means by short here. Video Valores consists of a system of film creation that combines cinema, ethics, philosophy, pocket cameras, and exhibition. Why this emphasis on the technology? Filmmaking is a very, very heavy thing to do. It can be very, very complex technologically. But it doesn't need to be, and I think that problem between that it's not really a problem, but it's an issue that some people think, oh, I could never make a film. I don't know how to use a camera. I don't know about lighting. Where do I get the microphones? And really, honestly, it's not that important. So some of the best films in this project have been made on mobile phones. Do you have a mobile? We were thinking, no? I mean, we thought this in 2014. And I'm not saying we were ahead of our time or anything like that. I mean, people have been thinking about using small cameras for a long time. But now, in the last couple of years, people really have started using mobile phones to make feature films and to make series for television. Steven Soderbergh in the United States, is a big filmmaker, made a whole series recently on an iPhone. You know, 'cause now you can get microphones that plug into them and all kinds of things. And it's fantastically liberating. It really is. I mean, I come from an age, as I said, which was celluloid, you know. It was a completely, okay, you can look back on that age with a lot of nostalgia, but it was completely undemocratic, fundamentally undemocratic. The tools that we needed were controlled. The cost of it was punitive. I mean, you couldn't just make a film. It was just very difficult to make a movie. And I'm a big fan. I mean, I'm 55 years old, but I'm like a kid in a toy shop with digital equipment, because it's just liberating. And we have in our pockets, you know, we have these things. Even a $100 cheap, relatively cheap mobile phone is an incredible tool. I mean, it really is fantastic. So we thought, okay, when you start to talk about the technology, then you just open you open up the possibilities, because like these people, this older generation of people in Spain now who are making films, they can manage a mobile phone, but they can't manage a big camera. I mean, it's just impossible for them. So they can express themselves using something like that. And as we'll see when I do this little exercise, editing exercise at the end of the course, it's the quality of the image is really not important. In fact, even I go as far as to say that sometimes the poorer the quality of the image, the more kind of life it has in it. And Carolina, for this little film I'm going to show you, she shot a video on a very simple, very cheap Nokia telephone with a little image, you know, a little tiny little image. And I expanded this image into a high definition image, you know, 1,920 pixels wide, and it looks blurred and it's out of focus and it's crude and it's rough, but it has a quality which is really, really humanistic, which is really something special. So that's now the ethics philosophy we don't work with. I mean, we're kind of pseudo philosophers, but we bring in philosophers to work with the students in the first for the first week. They have like classes about philosophy and workshops exploring the idea of universal values. What are universal values? Why do we have these things called values? Why are they important? Why don't we just live in a state of permanent anarchy? Why do we have these social mechanisms? And why, curiously, do people everywhere essentially have the same values? Is it natural? Is it genetic? Is it whatever? So they talk about these things to kind of open up an internal landscape for themselves. And we try to find philosophers or other academics to do that work, and then we go in and take over the kind of filmmaking, more creative and structural work. Video galleries have a target duration of between 60 and 100 seconds. And as I say, that's a target, because as I said, it very often gets longer. One girl, a really, really talented young woman from Andalusia, made the longest video of all. And I edit all of them, by the way. I have to say that I'm the editor of all 45 so far that we've made. So I work with each student individually. Nobody else is around. We sit together and finally we figure out the film. And her film ended up at over 5 minutes. Well, it was so brilliant that I said, okay, let's go with it. I didn't want to destroy it. It was a very complete psychological discourse. social psychological discourse. So that was the longest one, but it's not our objective really to make 5-minute films. Our objective is to make very short, very compact films. Universal values, yeah. Video Valores aims to stimulate the creation of short films that explore possible scenarios of a better world through the knowledge and practice of universal values. Tolerance, respect, responsibility, acceptance, inclusion, patience, kindness, love, etc. Okay, philosophers say that there are something like 21, depending on how you count them, and there's a lot of crossover between these values. Where does kindness stop and tolerance begin? What's the difference between kindness and compassion? Well, these are ideas which the students discuss and explore with their ethics tutors, and they go on thinking about them throughout the course right till the end, right through the whole process. But each short film expresses a universal value in a positive way that's intellectually, emotionally, and aesthetically challenging and enriching for the audience. For the students, it's a kind of cathartic process, because it starts from the interior and it gets worked out into the exterior for the rest of the world to watch. But why positive? Well, as filmmakers ourselves, we are kind of. It's just obvious, really, but I think that our world, our audiovisual world, is saturated with negativity. It really is, and it's almost impossible to go to I'm talking about mainstream cultural production is very, very, very negative and very, very, very stereotypical, and everything is divided. Everything in Hollywood. Everything is divided into good and bad. And the bad must be destroyed and the good must triumph. And it is just so reductive. And it's so destructive as well, intellectually, to the world, I think. We're really, really, really against it. So we thought it's good to be positive, and it's good to give people hope, and to see that, changing things is possible, and being better is also possible. But you have to do that in a way which isn't obvious as well. You have to make those statements in a way which isn't kitsch or isn't reductive as well, and isn't just very primitive. So there's a way to do it. The films that we make never tell the audience what they should think. They give the audience, or they try to give the audience a feeling. And that feeling is something which you can feel, obviously, and you can also think about in your own way, not in the way that we say. And sometimes it's not obvious what the film is even about. We were kind of inspired by a very Catholic film. Well, he's a Catholic, but not that there's anything wrong, especially with being Catholic. But Kieślowski, I don't know if you know Kieślowski from Poland. He's now dead, but he made a series of films for Polish television in communist Poland about the 10 Commandments, from the Bible. It's called the 10 Commandments, and there are 10 films. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not whatever, the commandments. And he never said which film is about which commandment. Some of them are obvious, but there's a lot of overlap between them as well. It's not like this is a film about the third commandment, or this is a film that's like you have to figure it out, and there's a lot of interconnectivity. So we also thought about that, and all these, because all these human values are about interconnected as well. They're very, very difficult to separate out. Carolina found a lot of inspiration in the work of a French philosopher and writer called André Comte Sponville. He works at the Sorbonne, University, I believe, still in Paris. And he has an incredible book called A Small Treatise on the Great Virtues. Now, he uses the word virtues in the way that we use the word values. I think that actually the word virtues is better than values, because values has a kind of slightly moralistic tone, you know. But when we developed this, we thought of values. But the virtues, there are more virtues than there are values. For example, kindness is a virtue, being kind to people. Humor is also a virtue. You know, if you're too serious in life, it can be destructive. So he looks at things in a slightly different way, that is it's not an easy book to read, but it's divided into chapters, and each chapter is one of the virtues. But Carolina read it. I have to admit, I have it in English, but I never read it. I read the introduction because I'm not like a very academic person, really. But I take Carolina's word for it. It's a great book. But if you want to read it ever, I think it's really recommendable. Mission statement. Yeah, it sounds very bureaucratic, but the mission of Video Valores focuses on main areas: the combination of film education and ethics philosophy. Okay, that's a combination which, without trying to sound super original, I've never seen before. I think it's something which we did genuinely develop in this combination of film education and ethics philosophy. Now, the courses that we do with this, they don't last very long. I mean, but it's quite intensive. So the course is about 1 month, in total. And in that 1 month, all these things are explored and developed, and a film is shot and produced and edited. It's more or less 50 hours of work for each student. The visibility and the opportunity to share personal life experiences, the opportunity to strengthen cultural ties between citizens of different origins, and to promote multicultural exchange, communication and cooperation. Remembering that, as I said, these values are universal. So, and also the films don't use a lot of language. There's hardly any dialogue in any of them. I can't think of a film which actually has dialogue. So it's a very visual experience and sound experience. And finally, as I've said, promoting the use of mobile phones or pocket cameras as everyday tools of creative social intervention. Everyday tools of creative social intervention. That's film training. For the workshop participants, Video Valores provides an excellent film training. Carolina, as I said, Carolina is really a writer and a director. That's what she would say if somebody asked her, what are you? I'm a writer and a director. If somebody asked me, I'm a film editor, I'm a sound designer, and I'm a kind of a photographer, but I never actually say that about myself. But I do photograph films. I mean, one of them you'll see this afternoon. I shot those films. I always feel a bit embarrassed to describe myself as a photographer because I just make it up as I go along, really. So there you have photography, editing, sound design, writing, and direction. That's all there is to film. There isn't much more. Art direction, wardrobe, all those things, but we don't touch those things. So between Carolina and I, we have the whole. We're the only teachers. So we teach the whole thing. The whole filmmaking process comes through us. So in approximately 40 to 50 hours, people who may never have made a film before learn how to conceive, plan, shoot, and edit their film with personalized and enlightened attention throughout the process. Yeah, it's very, very personalized. So the students, they have some ethics philosophy classes, and then they have some shared film workshop classes, and then after that, they're on their own with us, or just with themselves, thinking, planning, filming, and then editing with me, and with tutorials with Carolina on a personal one-to-one basis. They don't really work in groups anymore, unless they want to help each other. You know, unless someone needs a camera person or someone needs, then they work together. But that's between them to organise. So we give them a lot of responsibility in that month. Many of the students, it's really been it's honestly, say this without being pompous, you know, but it's really been a life-changing experience for many of these students to do this, and many of them have now gone on or going on to make longer films or to do other kind of work. Yeah, so far the process of this, the process has been. We did an edition in Barcelona in 2015 with a lot of students. Well, before that, in 2014, more or less, Carolina and I were working on our personal little films, like experiments, you know, like a kind of laboratory. And I'll show you a couple of those, as I said, in a few minutes. And then Berlin last year. We did Berlin last year. Very interesting. I'll talk about that in more detail. Barcelona, 2018. Right now, in fact, when I go back, I have to start editing with these older generation students. And we've been invited to South Africa next year to do this, which is going to be very interesting because there's a school there in Cape Town, which works on the system of the Reggio Emilia educational system, which is an educational system developed in Italy at the end of the Second World War, which is a kind of active educational system where children, teachers, and parents are together in the educational process. It's a very unusual educational system to empower children. Really take responsibility for their own education, and working with the families and with teachers as kind of guides. Children are educated. So it's a kind of experimental, but it's not. It has quite a long period now. 60 years have been. So they've invited us to South Africa to do this project with a teacher and a student working together, making a collaborative short film. And the children, like teenagers, 12, 13, or 14 years old, I imagine, will work with me on the editing. So the child will really finish the film with me. So I think we're going to make 6 of these films in South Africa next summer. So how did we get the money for this? Because you have an idea. Okay, when you begin your careers, you have these great ideas, and you say, okay, but how do you actually do it? You know, because it's not so. It's great. It's easy to have ideas, but how do you fund them? Where do you get the money from? Unfortunately, in Spain, in fact, Spain has not been that bad for us, but there's very little government fund. You know, there's very little government money in Spain because of this endless crisis, economic crisis. Everything, culture has just been completely destroyed. I mean, there's not a lot of funding. The funding in Spain for this kind of work comes from kind of public-private initiatives, in particular the banks. You know? I mean, the banks they have a system in Spain where the banks actually are quite active socially. Because they're not really banks. It's a very Spanish tradition, which I won't go into in detail. But anyway, we got funding from a bank called La Caixa, Obra Social, social work, La Caixa. They gave us money to do the first edition of this. And we had 25 students in that course. It was very, very big, very complex. And we got the support of the Filmoteca of Catalonia as well, the film institution there. These films have been screened all over Spain and in other countries as well, by streaming and things like that. So, in the summer of last year, we worked in Berlin with the support of European Cultural Foundation, which are in Amsterdam, the Cervantes Institute in Berlin, and an organization called Migration Hub Network, the concept there was specifically to assimilate refugees, because obviously Berlin or Germany had gone through this enormous migratory process, 1 million people coming into the country in a short space of time, all from different cultures, and all sharing, in theory, the same values. So we thought, okay, we can combine regular citizens and new citizens, as they call them. They call them new citizens, into the same project. It was very, very difficult to organise, but we did it finally. We had 2 students from Syria, 1 girl and one boy, Syrian refugees, and 1 Afghan refugee, and we had 3 people. Actually, we didn't have 1 German, regular German. We had a woman from Australia who came to study with it because she heard about it. We had a guy from France who also heard about it and came to Berlin to study, and a South African woman who's kind of German South African, who does actually live in Berlin. She's the only person who's like a regular, you could say. But that was what we got, and that was what we worked with, and we made some really, really nice things. And that's the thing about radio and media.
I have one little question, maybe a stupid one. How do you recruit your students to work on the project? How do you recruit students and filmmakers?
How do we find them? Well, in Barcelona, it was really complicated because we got the money from this organization called La Caixa, this bank, and we organized in Spanish we say convocatoria, a public call. We put information in libraries, on the press, and it was for the whole of the metropolitan area of Barcelona, and under 30. That was the restriction, and unemployed. The people had to be unemployed, under 30 years old, and living in the metropolitan area of Barcelona. So there were notices put in the newspapers. We did some radio shows. We put flyers, leaflets in the libraries, and other things. I've forgotten all of them, but we sent information over. And 75 people applied. Yeah, it was pretty impressive. Now, what we did is we developed a web form, and there was a website, obviously, and people had to go to the web form and fill in quite detailed questions to write answers to questions. Which values are you interested in? If you made a film, which of those values do you think you would choose to express? Why, etc. So we tried to make a kind of, well, in a way to be very to be selective, and because why to be selective? Not because we wanted to censor people, but just because we wanted to see how serious people were. Because it's easy to put your name on a list and go to a course and then drop out, after a few days or a week. So and that's very difficult for a course like that. You've got to have people who are really committed and a little bit serious, about wanting to do it. So finally, through that kind of process of selection and elimination, and well, we never eliminated anybody. We did what they call in Spanish a preparation course, and everybody was invited. All those 75 people were invited to come to a 2-day workshop, which was about editing, was about all the in slightly less detail, and I think 40 or 50 of those 75 came, and little by little people started disappearing, and finally we were left with like 35, and from those 35 we selected 25. But so we started the course with 25 students. Only two students dropped out during the course, and that was for personal reasons. One of them, his father died. something like that, you know. So 2 people dropped out. So we did a very good job. Actually, we did a very good job because we finished 25 films from 23 directors, because 2 directors made 2 films. Well, it was very heavy, you know. And I was editing all these films more or less at the same time. I can tell you, in 35 years of professional experience, it was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life, to edit 25 complicated short films simultaneously. I was like, I nearly cracked up, you know, doing that. But so that was how it worked. In Berlin, we did something similar. We advertised, we sent out emails. The Berlinale Film Festival also helped us, putting things on their website, because they liked the idea. But it was much more difficult to find people in Germany. Much more difficult. Yeah, we thought it would be easy, but it was not at all easy. It was not at all easy to find refugees who wanted to participate. I don't know why that is. We were also working from Barcelona and trying to organize in Berlin, and it was really difficult, I have to be honest.
And what was the language you used? English?
Well, that was that. Yeah, well, Carolina doesn't speak English very well. She speaks very basic English. So that was complicated because we had Arabic. Well, everybody had to speak English. That was a requirement. I mean, the refugees, and they did speak basic English. Most refugees, they do speak English. Funnily enough, well, not all of them, but these ones, they did speak quite good English. So, but Carolina worked with a translator, with an interpreter, and that provoked something very interesting. It was was very intense, I think, that thing about translating and going back and forth, but it kind of brought some things out which never happened in Barcelona. The films made in Berlin are much, much more psychological than the films made in Barcelona. It was much more. I don't know if it's a difference between Spanish students and I don't know. I have to analyze that. I don't really know. But she spoke in Spanish, and we had an English guy there working, English-Spanish translator, you know, and I worked in English. It worked. It wasn't a big problem, you know, but it was an interesting process. Yeah. We'd have to do the same thing in South Africa. She'd have to speak in Spanish. It's an added layer of complexity, but it's not unmanageable, you know.
Yeah, I had a question because you said the people had to be unemployed, the students.
Yeah.
So I take it the course is free.
Oh, the course is free. Absolutely. Yeah. No, very important that. The course is free. Well, I say the course is free, but in Berlin, we never found anybody to pay for we never found a financial sponsor. So what we did is the refugees didn't pay, obviously, because it would be completely unacceptable to ask refugees to pay. So the people who could pay paid, because they were professionals. They did pay. I think it was 650 euros, something like that. Yeah, I think. And we also found some sponsors, individuals, to pay for the refugees as a kind of act of generosity, really, I have to say. So the woman from Australia who came, she paid for herself and she paid for a refugee. I thought it was fantastic. It was in the spirit of the project, you know. So it was all done in Berlin. It was done for very little money. You know, it was very, very cheap. Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, because you know, there's a kind of this project is not about about making money, really. It's all done for very little financial money. Yeah. So so far, 44 video films have been created by 32 directors from 15 countries: Afghanistan, Argentina, Australia. So well, it's a list. Those 44 do include films by Carolina and me, as I say. Carolina made 5 of these, and I've actually made 7 of these little things. our Carolina and I don't go. Obviously, we don't go through the course. They're not produced in the same way. They're just produced very spontaneously. Like I wake up and I have an idea and I take out my mobile, or I film something and I think, oh, I could turn that into a little video. No, it's happened a few times like that. Just like sketches, you know, it's like a sketch pad, and you can, which is the great thing about these things. You know, you can, like the film I'll show you that Carolina shot on her Nokia. She was one day she was filming our daughter who was 2 years old, and something happened. I'll reveal later to you what happened. And Carolina immediately thought, I've got a film here. This is, you know, and then you have to put the thing together. You have to articulate the film. But so some of the films just start like that. You know, maybe you have something on your mobile phone that you filmed one day, and you suddenly think, yeah, there's a message in this. You know, I can put something together from this. And then you start working on the rhythm and things like, you know, more formal things. But yeah, well, I've said a little bit about that equipment, you know. But we don't need expensive technology in order to make meaningful films that are socially relevant and artistically compelling. This interconnection between the social and the artistic has been you know, I actually, I studied sociology and photography. When I did that in the 1980s, it was very unusual. Everybody thought that was a bit weird, you know, to do photography and sociology together. But now I see it's completely relevant. I mean, I really made, at that time, I really made the right choice. I never became a sociologist, but I see myself in a way as a sociologist in my work. Because then I started working in documentaries, and you know, working on documentaries or working on journalism, working as a journalist is a sociological discipline in a way. I'm right in saying that. It's a sociological activity and an artistic activity. And I think for me it's always been trying to keep those two things in balance, you know. And I was saying to Anne that, you know, even when I work even when I've done more journalistic things, I'm very obsessed with form as well. And as a writer, even as a writer, you know, I mean, I think, yeah, I think it's not unusual. I'm not unique in that way. I mean, it's just, for me, it's just kind of normal. Things have to be, to use the word elegant. I mean, I like the word elegant, but it doesn't mean something. Doesn't mean something, you know, pretentious or you know, I mean, the surface of products, the surface appearance of products, I think has to be good, but they also have to work. You know, they have to work on another level. I mean, you know, sorry to keep going back to mobiles, but these things are like magical objects. I mean, the functions are absolutely incredible. What's going on inside this thing is incredible, but people have to touch them as well. They have to hold them. They have to work in your hand. So there's a formal and the design element. You know, what angle is the curve on the screen? I mean, all those things. It's the same in any work of art. I mean, these things are kind of works of art in a way. And I think it's the same. The form has to be complete, and the function also has to be complete. And the objective of this thing is communication, and it does that perfectly. The function of it is how it works, and the form is how it feels and how it looks. And I think all those elements are absolutely vital to get right. A film editor is thinking about all those things. Is thinking about the end result. Is thinking about the audience, how the audience is going to receive this. And it's the same when you write something. How is it going to be received? And how is it put together? How is it worked out? You know, down to the very smallest details. Carolina has a book which she wrote about filmmaking. It's only in Spanish, but it's called The Methodology of Self-Knowledge, La Metodología del Autoconocimiento in Spanish. And that book was her. She didn't write the book for Video Valores. She wrote the book 8 years ago in Mexico. It's her philosophy about filmmaking. It's a teaching. Essentially, it's for students, but it's. I didn't bring a copy with me, unfortunately, but it's in Spanish anyway. But the principal methodology of Video Valores rests on giving the workshop participants the opportunity to reflect on and discuss what universal values mean, what universals are and what they mean, and how they touch our own lives or their own lives. What is your relationship with love? What is your relationship with compassion? How does tolerance affect you in your daily life? Those kind of ideas. So Carolina works with participants utilizing her methodology of self-knowledge. It's a methodology she explained in her book of the same name. Okay, yeah, it's the book. This methodology provides a series of tools for each participant in order to identify vital personal experiences that have marked in some way his or her life. This allows each participant to find a vital idea or emotion that they wish to communicate. These films don't come from the outside world, they come from your inside world in relation to the outside world. And finally, obviously they're on a screen for other people to appreciate and to enjoy. But it's a very psychodynamic process, I have to say. And as I say, I never participate in these things with Carolina, so it's really a mystery to me how she does it and what she does. I mean, I know what she does. I'm going to show you now what she does. Articulate a vital experience. Okay, a vital experience is something important to you. It's an experience that you've had at some point in your life. It could be a childhood experience. It could be something that happened yesterday. We identify, it's a little bit small, the text, I'll read it again. We identify a vital experience because it moves us. It touches our soul. Sounds a bit dramatic, but something that touches us and affects us. It is something we have an enormous need to communicate. Directing cinema is the ability to articulate a vital experience and then communicate it in images and sounds. To begin with, we need that the life experience has now. Sorry, that's a bit badly written. Is something wrong with the English? Well, we need to find a narrative structure for this life experience. Okay, because sometimes it's just a feeling, or it's a memory, or it's something which happened to you, something you read. But we've got to find what you said about stories. Okay, we're telling stories at the end of the day. There has to be some kind of logical progression in a story. You know, in very basic terms, there's a beginning, there's a middle, and an end. I think people can watch films which are much more unconventional, but I'm not sure that they're very satisfying sometimes. I mean, I work on kind of very often experimental films, you could say. Where people break these rules, and that's fine. It's great to break rules, but we also have to remember that we're communicating with other people. We're not just communicating for ourselves. So I think very often, very experimental film can be very, very mystifying and very disturbing for people to watch. Which is not to say that it's wrong, and I love some things which are mystifying. There's nothing wrong with it. The other day, about 3 days ago, I went to see a film by David Lynch. You probably know David Lynch. Do people know who David Lynch is? No? No? Okay, well, I won't mention it then. Because it's not relevant. But, just film which is difficult. No? Film which is difficult to understand. It's sometimes very enjoyable. We don't need to understand everything in the cinema. We can just feel things as well. Sometimes that's enough to feel things. But there's a quote here from Alejandro Jodorowsky, He says, I understood that every narrative structure, even that of jokes, can be interpreted. Every story is initiatory if it is contemplated deeply. What is an initiatory story? It is a story from which we can draw a life lesson. Where do we find them? Everywhere. Everything is initiatory. Why? Not for the truth it conveys, but for the projections, associations of ideas and reflections that it awakens in us. So these films have a kind of an objective to initiate a dialogue between ideas and thoughts and memories. Carolina says, our life is full of initiative stories that translate into vital experiences. We just need to be vigilant to identify them. However, the most difficult thing is precisely to identify a vital experience. To do this, I suggest completing 5 exercises that stimulate identification of a vital experiences. I call these exercises creative stimuli. This is Carolina's, this is really the heart of the methodology. Every student has to do some work. They have to work quite hard. They have to write an autobiographical story, and they have to ask themselves, has it really marked my life, and how did it move me? Write about a national or international news story. Express your opinion about it and say what moved you about it. Moving, the idea of something moving us is different from what information it communicated to us. Because it's not just, as I said, it's not an external thing, it's an internal process. Why do you feel strongly about this thing? That's thinking about yourself. It's thinking about the relationship between yourself and this news story, for example. A literary adaptation. Rewrite a story, novel, or poem in your own way. You may change details so that this literary idea fits with your own life. Okay, you may change the details of the story so that the story becomes more relevant to you. These are psychodynamic. These are kind of psychological exercises. They're not specifically to do with the final film that you'll make. It's just on the road to finding a way to liberate some ideas. Describe a sound that you associate with a unique emotion and which provokes a hidden influence on your state of mind or mood. Okay. For example, how do you feel when you hear that it's raining outside? How do you really feel when you hear the sound of rain? What does it remind you of? Do you have any associations? Or when you hear dogs barking in the street? Or all these things have some kind of effect. And so Carolina wants people to think about these kind of details as well. Choose a photograph or picture from any source for the impression that it makes on you. So the students have to prepare these things, and they come back to the class and they present them. I think they present them in open class, if I'm right. And then there's a kind of discussion about them, and then Carolina has one-to-one meetings with the students, and they go into much more depth about it. For some students, this is a really, really emotional. It provokes a lot of emotional response from the students. Okay, now we come to my part. Are there any questions? I mean, I'm going through a lot of things. I know it's quite complicated. But anybody have anything to say about it?
At the same moment you said you want to make something poetic and realistic at the same time. Is there a kind of contradiction in those two concepts? Poetic and realistic? That's the question.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't think it is a contradiction. Well, it depends what you mean by realistic, I think. I mean, poetic is poetic, and I mean, how do you define those words? Yeah, it's I don't know if I can go into detail about that. I mean, I don't see it as a contradiction, because I do that every day. It's, in a minute, I'll show you some of the films are much more poetic than realistic. Some of the films are very realistic, but I think you have to just start to define those words, which could take a long time, and I'm not sure I'm capable of doing it. But no, but it's an interesting question.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
an
quite.
interesting combination.
Yeah, I think it is. But I think where,
Because when we
I mean, film is very realistic, unless unless you have special effects and things which are or animation. Film is just light reflecting off objects. I mean, film is the capture of light being reflected. It's no more than that. So it's always, in a sense, realistic. If you just put the camera in front of something. But the poetic side of the poetry in film actually is an effect of montage. Because do you have something to write with? That question now brings us to that's very much traditional. I've seen a piece of black wool. Okay, yeah. This brings us to the juxtaposition. Juxtaposition, the putting together of things. The putting together of a word and another word. When we write, we're juxtaposing words. Linguistics is the juxtaposition of of grammatical elements. In film, juxtaposition is the combination of visual elements and sound elements working together. But this is where the poetry comes into film, really, in where one image ends and another image begins. When you look at a piece of film, each of these moments in the timeline is a juxtaposition between one image. There are frames here. The film is running, in this direction, and at every point here, you have one image stops and another image takes over. Well, at this position, something happens. This is the poetic. This is where the poetry comes into film, because the image is essentially realistic, but the juxtaposition, there's nothing natural about that fact of juxtaposing. This is absolutely. And then this is a video now, and a timeline. When you open Adobe Premiere or any editing program, you have the visuals, and then you have the sounds. And you might have different sounds in your timeline. And here you've got your music, and here you've got maybe dogs barking in the street, and this is rain, and this is I don't know what, could be anything. And there's a juxtapositional relationship here between the music and the dogs, between the rain and the music, and in this part of the image, between the dogs barking and the rain. So there's juxtaposition going on here, and then all of this as one thing, which is your soundtrack, is in a dynamic state of juxtaposition with the images. That's how film editing works, essentially. It's not more mysterious than that. And these things have different volumes, and these things you can change the colors if you like, or put effects onto them, or whatever. And the whole thing finally, comes out, and it's your film. And that's that in that part of in this process, this creative process, is where poetry is injected into the mixture. Because it might be, like you'll see in a minute, the film of Carolina shot with our daughter on her Nokia is a girl pushing a pushchair along in the countryside, and one of the dolls falls out and falls down some steps. And Hannah, our daughter, was absolutely shocked. She couldn't get the doll back. The doll was at the bottom of the steps, and Carolina was just filming it. Well, that's completely realistic. There's nothing essentially poetic about that. because the poetry is in the eye of the beholder. Okay, you can say, okay, oh wow, what a poetic situation, no? The desperation that she felt, the love that she felt, the responsibility that she felt for that doll. You can say that's poetic, but if you're maybe less sensitive, you're a less sensitive person, you'd say it's just it's a baby and she's lost her doll, so what, you know? But so in order to transmit something poetic about that, you have to work on it, you have to recut it, you have to synthesize the experience. It can't be 9 minutes long. It's only going to be 60 seconds long. Where the mother was speaking with her daughter, saying, "Come on, you can do it. Come on, go down on your stomach." You know, like we take that off and we put some other sound on. And then, in the case of this film, maybe I'll wait for that because I'll do that later. Otherwise, I get into it. But yeah, your question is very, very good because how do you combine realism and poetry? It's not really done in the camera. It's done here. It's done in the editing. Which we're in the right region here because the next page is methodology montage. Montage is editing. No? Great emphasis in the video Valoris process is placed on the central role of editing in the film creation process. And when I say great emphasis, the students, before they even go out into the street or go to their houses or whatever and film things, before they do that, they have some basic classes in film editing with me, and so that they understand that process. In the film school I work in Barcelona, all the new directors who come in, the first thing they do is learn about editing. Because in editing, that's where films are made, effectively. A lot of filmmakers would hate me for saying that, because everybody thinks that their role is the most important. It's a collaborative process. No? But if you go out, for example, in the film you'll see this afternoon, if you come to the screening, the long film, I shot about 60 hours of material for that film. 60 hours. No? 60 hours of material is not a movie. It's just material. It's just crude material. It's like the same thing as saying, you know, a bag of flour, butter, and milk is not a cake. To make a cake, you have to mix them together. You have to know what you're doing. That's just material. That's just the ingredients. No? So 60 hours of material are the ingredients. Yeah, the ingredients are essentially realistic. No? There's no poetry in the material. There might be poetry in a specific scene, but essentially it's light hitting the pixels of your camera. It's not more than that. So the students learn about editing even before they've got their idea, really, because it doesn't matter what your idea is. At the end of the day, you have to sit down in front of a computer nowadays and stick it together. That's the end result, and then you have a film. So that film, Lessons for Zafira, jumping ahead a little bit, was 60 hours of material. The final film is 74 minutes. So to reduce 60 hours to 74 minutes, you have a lot of possibilities, infinite number of possibilities, which is the right combination, which is the right selection process. How are you selecting and why are you selecting? It's a difficult part of that. So even before, here it is, even before they have finalized their context, participants receive a thorough grounding in the power of film montage and related creative possibilities contained by the intelligent use of sound as a parallel and powerful poetic force in cinema. That's ahead of me, does this part of the workshop. Although we do give some photographic guidance, like do's and don'ts, there is no house style, and we accept work with all kinds of images and compositional values. I personally think that images have to be more or less elegant. No, that word again. They have to work. You can't have somebody's head cut off you know, below the nose if they're speaking to you. I mean, there's basic kind of compositional things I'm thinking about. You know, what's a good photo and a bad photo. But we're not incredibly strict about that because I think all kinds of images can be elegant depending on how you edit them. So after shooting their films, participants work closely and individually with me to construct their video in a professional non-linear editing film program, if you understand what that means. That's Adobe Premiere. I asked you, people have used editing software, no? Or never? So put your hand up if you've edited anything on a computer. Yeah, like half the class, yeah. I teach film editing, and it's a strange thing, film editing, because it's a kind of a science nowadays, and an art as well. And it's very easy to get lost in the science and become very technical about things and worry about pixels and all kinds of technical details. But I try to, when I give classes, I try to work from the creative to the technical. So, but it's very important, the relationship, because if you don't know how to use an editing program correctly, you can't achieve certain results that you want to get out of it, you know. So you have to dominate the technology in order to express yourself. But I see that like in any other kind of art form. You know, if you want to be a good painter, you have to understand paint. You have to understand brushes. If you want to be a sculptor, you have to know how to use a chisel and a hammer, and you have like thousands of different chisels. It's the same kind of relationship between the mechanics and the ideas. Yeah, well, I've already covered that. I think not to overstretch things. And, okay, I think I think we'll now start to look at some films, because that's the important thing, to look at the work. Do you want to take a short break between this presentation and something practical, and then I can open up my timeline. If you want just 10 minutes to Okay, I thought I'd just show you a very little trailer so that you have an idea, a bit more of an idea about the kind of photograph. It's a trailer. I mean, it's not really like bum 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 bum, but it's music. You know? It's just a combination of images, just to show a little bit the diversity of images. And nearly all these images are produced, as I say, on mobile phones or on pocket cameras. When I say pocket, very simple cameras. And just gives you a taste of before we go further. What are we saying? No, the sound should be coming from the speakers. We did this earlier. Yeah, there are speakers. Yeah, that's good. I've got to do it. that's just a little trailer we put together. I'd like to show you a couple of the original films. Just two films. One by Carolina. One by Carolina. This is one of the first films she made when we were doing our experiments, and this is it contains the image. Now this was made on a very simple telephone as well, a Nokia. The images are really degraded because they're really pixelized and kind of dirty, but it's the film that she likes very much, and we use the symbol of the sun between the fingers. It goes like this. Okay, now this concept, I have to say something about the formal structure of these films. All these films end with PS. Why do they end with a PS? Because we realized early on that it's very difficult to understand these films in the way that the director intended. And this comes back to the idea of experimental film form, because we're not used to watching films like that. We just don't have enough practice in a way. And I honestly believe that our societies don't encourage us to be poets. They just don't. Our societies, our cultures are very logical. And this film is not logical. This is about emotions. But we're not used to watching films in this way. We're not used to consuming information in this way, frankly. If I was to show that film and then just end of film, end of story, most people would be going, and maybe me too, even though I'm somebody who thinks about these things, I'd say, what the hell does that mean? I mean, this thing, I mean, what's she trying to tell me, you know? So when we were making these experiments, we discovered that you have to help people. You have to give them a little bit of a clue as to what they've watched, and to give them something verbal, linguistic, in this way. So, and we were thinking originally, these are like film postcards, you know, like a postcard is not a letter. A postcard is a few words, and at the end of a postcard, in English, I don't know about in your language, but we say, P.S. I love you, or P.S. I'm thinking about you, or P.S. take care, no? Whatever. It's a linguistic kind of custom. So we thought, okay, at the end of each film, we write something, or sometimes these words come from a quote. You know, I have one Martin Luther King or something. Or I have another one of a Buddhist thing which I put at the end, but to help people understand and to reflect on what they've just seen. So first you watch the film, you have a title, you watch the film, and then you have a kind of a postscript at the end of the film which helps you to make sense a little bit. But it can't be obvious as well. You can't say, you've just watched something about, the fact that everybody is important. In every corner there is a sun. Well, what does that mean? It is not obvious either. You also have to think about that. That's it, yeah.
Well, this reminds me of something we were discussing last week about the verbal and the connection between verbal and visual communication. Because that's some and the PS thing. Also, like in the papers, we have photographs, and then there's this little extra verbal message. So, and I had a question before. You don't use dialogue or people talking in your movies?
I don't remember, but I don't think there's
because
one
that's
film.
of course an extra layer in the and all the juxtapositions. That's an extra story. So you, but it's not consciously. It's like just happening that way. You don't have people talking or telling stories.
No. It's very. I don't think there's one film with dialogue in it of all the 44.
That's interesting.
Some of them have a little bit of narration, like the filmmaker saying
like
something. Voiceover, but they don't know. I don't think there's dialogue in any one. No. There are no interviews or anything like that. Never. I mean, we wouldn't say no, but we would try to find a visual way to express things too. Because remember, the idea behind this is that you could show this film in Africa or in China, and people should be able to relate to it on some level. So if it's less language, then it's simply easier.
But you do translate a postscript in several languages.
Yeah, we did. Well, we did a French and an English copy because we showed it in France.
Okay.
So we just subtitled. But the original is with this typewriter effect, at the end. But then we just sometimes now we do them in double languages, but it's a lot of work to change all things. Sometimes it depends on. In Berlin we have English copies, now one of them I made is very early on. It's called, Now this I have to say that this film is not is very strong. The content of it is quite powerful. Why did I do it? Okay, well, this is interesting because this film started with the postscript. We ask people in this course to express things very difficult things sometimes, very emotional things which have marked them. I thought, if we're going to ask people to do that, we have to also put ourselves in that position. Well, I didn't think that consciously. It wasn't like a strategy. It was just that I had this thing in my mind. This is how something can happen, in this course. I'll tell you frankly, this is very frank, what happened to me. My second daughter, I have two girls. The second one died in Mexico. So I now have two girls. One is deceased, and my wife and I were always thinking that we would have two children, like people do. Three children is very expensive, blah blah blah, whatever. So when the second girl died, then later, a couple of years later in Spain, we decided to have another child. Okay. And I know this is very personal, but you can't do this thing. You can't. This is my illustration in a way that you can't do this unless you're not prepared to be honest. One day, after my third daughter was born, I was looking at her and I was thinking. I suddenly had this horrible thought. I thought, wow, if my second daughter hadn't died, then Hannah, the third daughter, wouldn't have been born. I was paralyzed by the thought, It was a completely existential idea for me. And I thought, wow, can I express that in a film? You know, because like I'm a filmmaker, so my normal way to express myself is through images, no, through poetic and realistic images. And I also had something in my mind that somebody said to me once, in a very difficult period of my life. Somebody said, everything happens for a reason, and at exactly the right time. Okay. Now, if you believe that, it's a very, very powerful thought. I'm not sure I do believe that, but part of me has to believe that. If you think everything happens for a reason, and that means everything, why does everything happen for a reason? Well, because it happened. If something happened, then there must be some reason for sort of thinking these things, no? So I started with the phrase. I knew what the phrase was. I didn't have to think about it. And I tried to illustrate that with the story of Hannah being born, and the second daughter being dying. So I thought, this is a most difficult idea to express. I thought, can I express that in 60 seconds? I had to really work hard, very hard, to figure out a way of doing it. And then, one day, I'd moved from Mexico to Spain. We'd migrated. And one day I was looking through a book, which I have, a big heavy book, reading something. And I opened the pages, and I came across some flowers pressed in the book from the funeral of my daughter. I thought, wow, all these things are coming together. How can I put it all together, you know? And so I found this little film, this form, and I worked at it, and it's very, very simple, but it's very, very, I think, personally, very, very, very profound. It's like this. So this is an example, really, of texts, of images, of very realistic images, images which I never filmed for a purpose of making a film. But finally, through this process here, and this is also edited to music. Not all the films are edited to music. I have to say, very few of the films are edited to music. But this is the music of the last film with this very breathy singing. Is a composer. She's a composer who lives in Spain, and she did this music for us. So it wasn't. It's not like just finding a piece of music and sticking it on. But this is this film. That's exactly 60 seconds. I can guarantee, not a second longer or shorter. And you talk about poetry and realism. No? Those images. Well, there are some images which are designed as poetic images, like from the screen of the flowers to the real flowers, that is also an image, of course, and then to the baby. Now, I had to practice that, to do it. But some of the images, photos, are just things which you just find, in the family album, as it were. So it was a combination of a lot of different elements, and it's the rhythm of it, which obviously in this situation it's just music, So you made it to the music, or the music was written to the film, in fact. But I think that's one of the perhaps the most disturbing films, probably, which has been made in this series.
I like very much the ha. The ha word, because that's also the name of your
Hannah, Hannah, yeah. I'll see in a minute a little bit more of Hannah. So those are a couple of examples of my work and Carolina's work as directors, editors. And now I'd like to show you a little short documentary about the Berlin course, where some of the students talk about this process. We made this for the website, but they talk about these are our students from one of them, some short interviews. This is 5 minutes.
Michel Toomey, from South Africa, lives and works in Berlin. Dian Naim is from Syria. He now lives in Berlin. Sarah Al-Kailani, originally from Syria, is resident in Berlin. Arafat Nawid, from Afghanistan, lives in Berlin. Christopher Kahn, a world traveller, came to Barcelona for the workshop. He is originally from France. Marianne Brophy was living in Barcelona when she heard about Video Valores. She's originally from Australia. She filmed her material in Jordan during a trip there, attended the first week of the workshop in Berlin, and edited in Barcelona after the end of the workshop.
I decided to do this course because I really would like to combine creativity with my work. For me, this was an amazing experience. It's been such a gift. Carolina and Daud have taken me on a journey, and it has been an extremely cathartic process for something that I have experienced in my life. But this methodology is very different. It's very practical, and it gave me so much in terms of experience and skills. And I really hope that this process will continue and this workshop will be spread across different parts of the globe, because it is extremely valuable when working in a group and sharing these ideas and stories.
experience to show it or to share it in way. Yeah, but now I feel like I want to show more details I already did, or I experienced, I did it, or I know a lot of things like I knew already it happens, and I want just like documenting that without victimizing the people. Other video valorized videos, it's just like shorts, visual things. It's ending to DS, like it's, the idea will arrive to all the people around the world.
It wasn't like the normal film workshop that I expected. And I thought about this, making like small 1-minute films about, each film is about a human value. You go from this to a word that you want to express. So I found it's very exact and precise that alone I don't know how to reach this. Before Video Valores, I didn't have the confidence to try and use the material. The process of reaching what you want, they step by step, and you feel like you're in this step now, you're in this step now, you're in this step now. And this feeling, it's very gratifying, yes. And yes, it's I didn't feel this before.
So I learned about relations and contrast. I learned about the emotions in the way that's to be expressed, and also the metaphoric way of filming and the creativeness and how a person can be creative. And I think this project, Video Valores, is very helpful to document those facts and to project it through medias in order to see other people's reaction, and also to have them look at the actual status of people that they are feeling as a consequences of wrong political decisions in the field.
Have the opportunity to take this amazing course, Video Valores, and learn very interesting things. First, because I believe that if you want to make films, you have to go in the street and practicing. I participate once in Barcelona, Carolina, and after hearing she was about to set up a workshop in Berlin, I had no hesitation. I took the plane and I came especially here. So thank you very much, Carolina, and Mahmoud, and I wish you good luck with this amazing project.
As it was for the rest of the participants, this was Mary Ann's first film.
those were the. I'd like to show you, I think 3 of those films, and then I'll look at the timelines in the editing program, because we don't have time to look at all of them. Just to open up the project. This is very long. I'd like to limit this because it gets a bit this film I won't show you now. Let's look at these films. Well, this one is by the Syrian girl. This is the Syrian girl's film. This is the Afghan guy. This is very interesting what happened in this film. I'll tell you a little bit about this experience. This is the other Syrian refugees film. Quite an interesting piece of work. And this is the woman from South Africa. Also a very interesting psychological process in this. So let's watch the 4 films. distortion here. 1 second. Okay, I think you get an idea about the way the text and the images are working together in these projects. It's a very complex relationship in many ways, because the text doesn't tell you what the film is about, but the text helps you. It gives you a kind of a key to open to open up the meaning a little bit. These are all very personal films by these, very personal. This is like a really heavy psychological experience for these filmmakers. And I just like to show these films. This is a little bit complicated. 1 second, I just have to open up these projects, because now these projects are in the final state that I left them in when I edited them more than a year ago. They are okay. So just looking at start with Michelle. Okay, so what you can see here from an editing point of view is all the files connected with this project. I think this is very interesting. You can see this now. This is this process. No, this is this is the, one second. For anybody who knows about film editing, obviously, here we have all the material in this section, and here we have what we call a timeline of the project. This is the video track. This is what you're watching, and here below it, you've got this is a representation of the project. Here we've got the sound. When I teach film editing, I teach that this. I tell my students that this is a sculpture process. I really make the metaphor of what we do here, what we do in editing, as a kind of sculpture. For me, it's very. I don't do. I'm not a sculptor, but I imagine that it's like taking a little bit of clay or material, and you stick a little bit more. Little by little, you build up this thing. So here we've got the images. Now this is the first image of the tree. Here, this is it's in English and Spanish here. Here we've got well, whatever. It's in Spanish, this version. In Spanish. Well, anyway, this is a haiku poem, in the style of Japanese poetry. Where you have 7. It's very strict metronomically. It's a 7-5-7 syllable haiku. She wrote it. The director wrote it. So. But it's not. Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah. It's blocked. Moments free falling. Okay, and then there's the in flight beyond broken wings. This is how she structured this thought. This quite complicated thought. Liberating roots. Okay, the haiku doesn't tell you either what the film is about, but it gives you another poetic layer of information in this discourse. Now, here you can see what's happening on the soundtrack. We have the forest. Okay, that's just to talk a little bit about, because as I say, sound is a very important part of the poetic process in this. It's not just images. There's a complicated web of relationships here. When we think about sound in films, we think about diegetic sounds, non-diegetic sounds, extra-diegetic sounds. I'll tell you what this means, because extra-diegetic, and something that we call crossover diegetic. Crossover. Okay, these 4 things. These are sounds which relate to the reality of what you're watching. For example, you're looking at a tree in a forest and you hear the forest. It could conceivably, it's actually a sound effect. It's not filmed with the shot, but it's the same thing. Nobody knows. So this is something which is happening on the narrative level. And then we have sounds which are not happening on the narrative level. They're things, they're poetic sounds, let's say. When you hear music in a film, that music is coming from a composer. It's put on top, it's another layer on top of the film. If 2 people are talking and you hear music, the characters, as we understand it, are not listening to that music, but the audience is listening to that music. It's the soundtrack of the film. That music is non-diegetic. It's not connected to the narrative, but it's connected to the interpretation of the narrative. Okay. And then we have sounds which we call extra-diegetic. They're sounds which could occur in the reality of the film, but they're at a level or an interpretation which is not realistic. For example, when we're looking at the tree, a leaf begins to fall, and it hits another leaf, and the 3 leaves fall to the ground. When that leaf hits the branch, I put on a sound which is... Now that would be impossible to hear in reality, and no microphone could capture it. So you have to put that on as an extra diegetic sound, which emphasizes something in the film. No? I wanted that moment of the 3 leaves falling to have an impact on the audience, so I had to give it some kind of... It's like underlining something, in a sense, no? And then there are other sounds which are more complex relationship with the film, which cross over from diegetic to non-diegetic, or from diegetic to extra diegetic. They start as one thing, and they transform into the other thing. You know what these things are because you watch movies. It happens all the time. We never really identify what's happening, but it's a psychological process which is happening to us. That's why film is very, very powerful, because film, through the editing principally, is the art of control, is mind control, and that's why it's very dangerous. Propagandically, film can be a very, very powerful, very dangerous, very controversial thing, or it can, it can help you to find the truth, whatever that means. It can help you to build an idea, a relationship with the real world, but it can also distort it. I mean, Leni Riefenstahl, the famous Nazi propagandist, was a great, great, great filmmaker. Her technique was incredible. You can still watch her films today, and you can marvel at the creativity. But they were in service of Nazi fascism. Is it right? Is it good? Is it artistic? Is it truthful? It's a very difficult thing. But as pieces of work, they're wonderful pieces of film, but they're also terrible pieces of film in a philosophical and political context. So we have a lot of... that's just looking at the sound now. Sound in film is much more difficult to work with than images. Images are relatively easy, frankly. They are what they are. But sound, you have like... Somebody says to me, I want to hear rain. Jesus, but there's hundreds of different types of rain. What kind of rain, What does it sound like? Rain falling on London sounds different from rain falling in the forest. Rain in the Sahara Desert sounds different from... You know what I mean? When you start to analyze sound, it's like a whole world of possibilities. So you have to be very careful what the tone of the sounds are, etc. So in this film here, we have... There's the branch, That there is that click is when the leaf. Here you can see the moments. That's the extra diegetic sound there, underlining the falling of the leaf. And then we look along. Okay, the music, the forest fades out. This is a symbol in the timeline of a fade out. Here we have a storm. Here are bicycles passing. 2 bicycles which go past. Then my storm, thunder and lightning starts. Well, thunder more than lightning. Starts here. We don't see any rain, but this storm is a non-diegetic sound. There is no storm in the film. The storm is a purely psychological effect to reflect the state of mind of the person watching, in a sense. And there's a very short metronomical. If you look at these pieces of film, they're exactly the same. Well, more or less, they're exactly the same length. this is what we call here, it's a relationship of images which is metronomical. It's to say that they're the same length. Not one is longer than the other. So there are three birds, three fragments of dead birds, and then there's a car passing here. Now that is a diegetic sound, obviously, because it's the sound of a car. It's not the sound of the real car. It's the sound of for the quality of the sound. It's taken from an effect, a bank of sound, and that's a compression of the. If we actually look at her, we can't look at her original material. It's not linked anymore, but this is the same shot, just compression of the sound of the time there. And then we come to this little thing of this thing of the bird. And obviously these sounds, the sounds of the feet of the bird are extra diegetic, because you could never hear the sound of a bird's feet on sound. It's impossible. I mean, maybe you could, but so it had to do that, you know. And then at the end, the bird jumps onto the grass. That's another sound. There's the grass there. That's the fragment of grass. You can see what I mean by sculpture here. This is really, I mean, I can't think of a better metaphor than this. Making a sculpture in sounds and in images. And the flapping of the wings, of course, extra diegetic. Music, which is completely non-diegetic sound. It's nothing. There's no guitarist sitting in the forest. This is just a musical effect. And the music takes us out of the film, and that's it. You can see it's 1 minute 44, 1 minute 44 seconds more or less there. And that's, you know, and sometimes you have to find a way as an editor to express things. The video went out of focus or something horribly at the end. So we used some still photos. She had some photos, so you just changed from the video to the photos. There's so much freedom in this process, in this artistic process. But you know, it's 1 minute 44 seconds. We edited this for 2 full days. 2 full days, more or less 16 hours of work to do this. And then a few more hours, I think, for changing them, doing the sound effects and some other things I had to find. I went back to Barcelona and I finished a few things there for her. But when I do these films with the student or with the filmmaker, we sit together. I never work on my own. I never just take over and do their film. We sit and suffer together and try and find a way through the process. You know, it's and when they come in to work with me, they have a rough idea of what they want. But it's never complete. And it's like me suggesting something, them saying no, I prefer that. I didn't want to say that. I think we should do it like this way. And sometimes they have like a terrible crisis now, and they have to go out and walk around and drink coffee and come back. No, it's a very dynamic, very, and everyone is different now. All the problems are always very different. Let me open another one of these. Michelle. Okay, now. Very interesting process. Now Two Friends and a Vagabond. What happened here was that he filmed. You can see that this was video. You know, originally, well, I made them into still photos, but he made a video which was very, very, very badly shot and very uneven. And very, very poor, because he had a cameraman doing something where it's just a friend of his, and all the shots were moving, and the colours were, and it was really bad. And I had like a massive crisis personally. You know, I was doing this in Berlin, and he came with his material, and I just didn't know what to do with it. For the first time in my life, I just said, I don't know what to do. I can't do this. It was just he wasn't clear about the story. He knew what he wanted to say, but he had no idea how to say it, and I didn't have any idea either. So I said, okay, I'm going back to Barcelona in a couple of weeks. I'm going to show this material to Carolina, and we'll sit together, and we'll Skype, and we'll talk to each other, and let's just keep working on it. No? So I went back, and I thought the first thing I've got to do is give this project an aesthetic. You know? So I thought the video is very, very bad. Why don't I just make it into still photographs? Okay. And then I managed to save some video where he puts the food in his mouth, his real video, and where he opens his jacket and gives the mirror to the friend. Those are two moving bits of video, but the rest of it I turned it into still photos and made them into black and white as well, because the colours were all really horrible. Just like, you know, this is the thing about, you have to think about the aesthetic of what you're doing. I think things, you know, that word I mentioned earlier, elegant, I mean, things have to be elegant in a certain way, which doesn't mean they have to be perfect like Hollywood. It just means that they have to be consistently interesting throughout the film. And so now, in terms of the soundtrack, this was easy. It was just music. It was an original piece of music. It was a very nice piece of music, but there's nothing else. And we decided to, there it is in English, you see. We decided to just subtitle the story, just to do it, so it's a literary experience and a visual experience at the same time. And we wrote it thinking about, I was reading at that time for my children, Aesop's fables, you know? It's very Aesop. It's like, you know those fables? Yeah? You read them, no? Or you know them, no? Well, they're classical. Well, he was a slave, you know, in Greece, I think, Aesop, no? He used to tell stories. And, you know, I'm sure you know them. Everybody knows them. It's part of it. But it's a very simple, like a children's kind of story, you know? Like something which happens. So there's a piece of moving. There's a piece of video, no? For example, that's video there. It doesn't run very well. This project now has problems because it's been around since. But that was the way that worked, and I had to do quite a lot of. And then we found these two images we found in a library to try to take the film up, to try to take it to the kind of a, you know, looking down from the heaven as it were. And all these are just bits of the video, freeze frame, like shot from the video, still photos taken from the video, and that's how. But it was that was also very difficult. I have to say, like I said, it had really a crisis. We wrote the story, we perfected the language, we checked it with him, and then he Skyped us, and he said, "I like it," and it was a big thing. That was well, I'm going quite quickly, I know, but I've got to. If you want to say anything, please interrupt me. No? Sarah was an incredible student, incredibly intelligent and smart, and she knew exactly what she wanted to say. And here's Sarah's project with this one. Now all these figures are her, no? All these people.
All 5 of them.
Yeah, wow, was it difficult to do? I can't tell you how complicated that was. Because she filmed it as well on an iPhone. And she didn't have a tripod. No, and she had to balance this. She invented this system, no? Like she had a bottle of water, and she'd take the iPhone, and she'd position the iPhone around the room. And she filmed herself walking in the black dress, and she filmed herself on the bed, and of course the camera had to stay in the same position as well. And then I had to find a way to combine all these images, like ghosts, one over the other. No? Well, you can do, it's not so complicated, but it was complicated because none of the figures could touch each other. She knew when she filmed them that they had to be in different parts of the room, no? And not overlap, because otherwise I would have like one figure on top of another. So she. Okay, and she filmed all these. This is her window. She had the idea. It's like incredible. She knew exactly what she wanted to see, but she didn't know exactly how to do it. And so she did it. She did it 3 times. She filmed it 3 times, and every time she came back, there was something wrong with it. I said to her, "It's okay." And she said, "No, I'll film it again." I said, "Okay." So she went home. She did it again. She came back. There was something else wrong with it. She said, no, it's no problem. I'll do it again. And then this is here's the film she had of her leaving. She walked from Syria to Turkey, and then she took a plane from Turkey to Germany. That's how she became so she had this video of her plane taking off from Turkey, which she wanted to get into the film as well. And then we had to make a transition from the airplane to her bedroom. That's with the blinds, no, coming down. And that's how we did it, because the sky goes white at that point. And then there's a crossover from one video to another, and here are the sounds, which are like strangely, I don't know what they are, because they're kind of diegetic, non-diegetic, because although you're watching a blind, you're not seeing you don't hear a blind when you watch a blind. It's just coming down. The camera is coming down. You hear here. And then we're into the room. No? And it all happens very quickly. From one reality to another reality. And then there's this very big development here with sound. And now this what I have here is a composite shot, as we say, of something which was like this in the timeline, and it was just so complex that the machine couldn't play it. So I had to export them and re-import them into the project to fix it technically. So it's not everything, but here this is a repairing thing. I repaired some problems, so it's just very. And then the next figure. So we use the blinds to punctuate the entrance of the figures. No, it's obvious more or less what's happening there. And so, but these are composite images. The images were much more, were different layers. They were in layers going up. And then this thing about the eye, which is an obviously you can see what's happening here with the sound. And then here's a sound thing happening, because we have to pull up the blind. Now the blind has to go up. There's more stuff happening down here. You can see it's really complex. I've got different musical tones, a tone for the room, different atmospheres, and these sounds here, these blind sounds. These timelines don't really write, so there's some problem with the linking. But there's the, and then here is where the blind starts to go up. There are some effects there which I put into the thing, and they disappear. Those disappearing and leaving the background. Very, very, very difficult. I mean, you can do this thing with you can do this thing better in other programs, to be honest, animation programs. I didn't have them available. And this idea, that, I mean, she's talking here, it's obviously about depression. I mean, the black figures represent periods of depression that she experienced living in Germany. And this idea that, turning on the lights. I mean, it's kind of poetic. I don't think it's difficult to understand. But to express it on a poetic level is the sound of the blinds. Obviously, was the closing, like the emotional closing of her. And these black figures represent that, and then finally, remember to look at the sky. Remember to look at the sun. Remember to be positive and look at the good thing.
It's funny, I thought it was the reason for her leaving.
Yeah, me too.
Really?
Those black figures were like dead family. Or
Okay.
That's how
It's really interesting how sometimes people interpret things. But no,
I saw a reason in it for her leaving.
Okay, that's interesting. First time I've heard. Do you thought the same thing? Did anybody else think that as well?
Like ghosts from the past.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, this is an interesting thing because that's not. It's completely legitimate if you think that. If that's what it stimulates in you, then go for it. No, really. I mean, it's not. This is not a dictatorial. This kind of work is not dictatorial. That's the thing about it. I mean, most films. If you go to see most films, particularly very high-budget films, there's only one point of view normally permitted. If you go to see a Steven Spielberg is the master of propaganda. He's a propagandist, effectively. I mean, he's a very talented guy, and I have a lot of respect for him, etc., I think. But you go to see those films, and you are told what to think all the way through. There's very little space in commercial cinema for a personal intervention. The music channels you in one direction, the narrative takes you in exactly where it wants to take you, and in this kind of work, you're free. This is the idea of freedom, really. So if that's what it suggests, then that's something that you can think about or reflect on. It's perfectly fine. So this was. And then she really liked this. Seems to be missing from this project. Because he did it in another program. She says, if you only remember to leave the light on, if you only remember to turn on the light. She read it in a Harry Potter story. Do you know it? I didn't know it, but she said, and then she was a bit embarrassed. She said, I don't think I can put Harry Potter on the end of my book. I said, well, just put J.K. Rowling. Sounds a bit more intellectual. So, she's a big Harry Potter fan. But for her, it synthesized the experience. It synthesized the thing. And the last one, I'm running out of time. I'm very conscious of that. The last one was, what was the last one? Dia, the one of the destruction of the city.
Yeah.
That was very nice film, very difficult for him to make. he was a Syrian refugee who walked from Syria to Germany, and he wanted to remember. I mean, he remembered in the neighborhood that he lived in Syria, how long it took to build. You know, when he was a child, he remembers the sound of these machines building, construction, and how easy how difficult it is to build a city and how quickly it can be destroyed. In a few hours, he remembers, everything that during the 70s and the 80s was built in 20 years was destroyed in 3 hours. So he wanted to express something like that, and he found this incredible idea. I thought, when he suggested it, I thought, it's going to be really difficult. I don't know how we can do it. But he tried, and then he couldn't technically, and photographically, it was really difficult to. So he travelled from Berlin to Barcelona to work with me, and we shot it again together in my studio. It's unbelievable. And we did this construction. Here you can see how we did this. Here's the sound, which is the motivation. Now this is an interesting thing. It's non-diegetic, but it connects with the construction. And these images, the way we did this is we built the thing, this structure with these bricks, for children's bricks, and then we took them away. It was the only way to do it. Took them away, took another photo, took them away, and then did it in reverse. So it looks like it's being built. Otherwise, you could never do that. So we had to figure all that out. It took us like a day or two. And so slowly the city gets built, and on a representational level. Obviously, it's very representational, and it's all cut very metronomically, with the same. All the spaces are exactly the same length, and it's just 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then the destruction, and we filmed it from 2 angles, on the top and on the bottom. And you hear the street, you hear the daily life here. The helicopter comes in, the explosions. It's just a combination of destruction sounds. So the narrative structure is clear, It's construction, peace, war, after the war, And he remembered that people were living in the basement of the buildings. After the city was destroyed, they were living and looking out into the sky, And he remembers himself seeing an airplane go past, and. So then we come to these photos. These photos are not documentary photos. They're photos he did with a friend. They're not from Syria. He did them in Berlin. He found some sand and rocks, and he just got a friend and they're just fragments, of human hair. The first one is here, human hair, of shoes. But they're not documentary photos. They're just photos he took. And he did this with his girlfriend, with this shape, cut-out shape. And then the plane takes off. Once again, his own real footage. This is the real footage of an aeroplane. And then, now here, this was a very funny thing because. He wanted this aeroplane going past, and I just couldn't find a shot. I just couldn't find anything in a documentary. It was very difficult to go out and film. So I made this little thing. This is you can do this this is a little animation here. So we have we have the different elements. We have the shape with transparency here, like a transparent image now. And here is clouds, just painted in Photoshop, and an aeroplane, which I got on the web, which is animated and then reduced to make it very small. And there it is, they're passing, going through the clouds, because the clouds are on another level here. You know? So the plane goes under the clouds and comes out the other side. And I have clouds twice for some reason, I don't really remember how. So that was a mini animation that we put in there. It's the point of view, because it's kind of realistic and hyper-realistic at the same time. It's kind of a little bit strange. You see it, it doesn't run very well here, it's a bit, but it basically works like that. So we tried to give it a different feeling, and then it's the end of the film, you know, and that's the way it works between. You can see what I was talking about juxtaposition. Juxtaposition, this word juxtaposition, is what makes film work. Film works through a series of juxtapositions. Words, images, sound, that's all we've got basically. We've got words, images and sounds, and we've put them together in certain combinations.
I was thinking about your metaphor of sculpture.
Yeah.
Do you know Agnes Varda? She used another metaphor for her film work. She says, I'm a writer.
Ah, yeah, writing with images. Yes, you're
that's
quite
her
right.
Metaphor.
You're quite right.
And I think that's maybe a more dynamic metaphor to describe.
Yeah.
To describe what's happening all the time and also the evolution, juxtaposition.
Yeah. No, I do tell my students that as well. You know that when you write a film, there are different stages of writing. There's the bit where you actually sit with a pen and paper or a text. Writing the script, and then filming it is also writing in a way. You're writing with human beings. You're sculpting. You're mixing metaphors here, but anyway. And then it's very clear that you're writing with images. No, she's quite correct. It's just that I see it like because I actually do it with my hand, with my hands and with the mouse. I have this feeling that I'm putting things on top of each other and underneath each other. So for me, it's a bit more. I haven't had time to look at Hannah and her babies, but I'll show you the little film, just to end on a nice film. I wanted to do a little bit of editing, but I've run out of time. I'm very sorry about that. But I'll just show you the film. I'll show you the material. That's what I'll do. We've got just in 5 minutes to finish. Hannah. Yeah, okay, Hannah. I have a very strange story connected to this. Well, this is the material, no? We'll just run through it very, very quickly. One day, Hannah was walking along. Carolina was filming. You can see how bad this video is. And here, she was pushing the pram, and suddenly, boom, the baby, well, it happens twice. So here, this is the event. The baby doll falls down the stairs, just one step, but she couldn't get it back, and she was really suffering, no? And Carolina, there's a little bit of a close up there, and Carolina was just encouraging her, but not helping her. Some people said, "Oh, it would be terrible." You help her. It's a bit but eventually, she's got these great expressions, and then eventually she couldn't find a way to do it. That's a great existential. Eventually, she goes back. She tries to solve the problem. She comes round. Eventually, Carolina helped her a little bit. She goes down on her stomach, and then she gets lost. Goes off to the side and then comes back, and there's the solution. That's the solution now. And yeah, she's done it. Okay. Okay. Now that was not filmed really with an intention to make a movie. It was just filmed like parents do these things now and put them on YouTube normally. And then we were thinking, you know, wow, that's a really powerful metaphor. That's the metaphor for compassion, for responsibility, for love, for all kinds of things. For these, you know, these human values. So we made a little film of it, and it's one of the simplest and most beautiful things, really, because it's something that you can't invent. It's just that's the reality. Going back to your thing about poetry and reality, that's just realism. There's nothing particularly, there's nothing essentially poetic about that. But if you put it in a context, and you say this is about human values, and then you put a PD at the end. The PS on the end of this was, in English, with the hope, here I have it, do I? Well, with the hope that we will grow up to be responsible, loving adults, as children we wish to be. And I just think it's a lovely little film. I do this as one of the exercises I do with my students. I give them this material and we work on it. And it takes them like 2 weeks to solve this problem. When you're just beginning as an editor, well, not 2 weeks, not every day, like 10 hours. No, they work on it and they find it quite difficult. To express something. But I'll just show you the film so we end on something positive. It's called El Paseo de Hannah. Hannah's Journey in English. Hannah's Journey. Do you want to turn the lights off, Chris? This is my edit of this, and you know, I wanted to tell you something before I show you this. I'll tell you something really interesting. This is really quite spooky, I have to say. I don't know what that means. One day, a student of mine was editing this, and she said to me, wow, you know, that's really weird, this film, because the position of the doll on the concrete, when it falls face down, she said, really reminds me of this photo. And I said, wow, yeah, that's really weird. I never thought about that. That was her association, you know? Because the doll, well, you all know this photo. This photo went around the world. It had a big impact politically, etc. And I said, oh yeah, you're right. It gave me like a chill, you know? And I thought, and I went to the internet and I investigated the date of the photo, and I discovered that this photo was taken on the same day that I shot the video.
Oh, really?
No, honestly, I swear.
That's amazing.
And I was like freaked out about this. I thought, wow, this is, you know, like you think, wow, there's order in the chaos, no? It's like the chaos theory, that actually everything is being organized in some way. I don't know what the significance of that is. You could just say it's a coincidence. Okay, it's a coincidence, but it's strange. So, I'd like to do a new version of this film, this Hannah's film, and put that photograph at the end as a visual PS. You don't even need words. You don't even need to. You just understand. You know, I think I've never done it, but it was very, very strange. You know, it was a visual association I never made, although I knew that photo, but I just never put them together. And then to find it was the same day, I thought that's just too much. So this was how I edited it. I don't really like my edition of this, to be honest. I never, but it's a bit arty, I think. But we'll see what you think. Well, we come to the end of this excursion. So that's what we do. Yeah, that's video valores. I don't know if you have final questions or from anybody. It's a lot of information. Actually, sometimes we show these films together as in a big group. And if you watch too many of these films, you get really saturated. It's really a heavy experience. Because each one you could think about for several days, But honestly, I think it's true. So if you show like 20 of them, people are like, they come out. It's really, the idea is to watch one and go away and think about it or dream about it.
What is next week in this class, we'll think about them some more. We will let you know.
Yeah, they're all on the internet, in fact. You can watch all of them on the web page. It's free to watch. It's videovalores.com. Nearly all of them are there. And,
well, thank you so much for this fascinating masterclass. The only thing I can say is see you this afternoon to talk some more about this.
You're going to watch a long film, around 75 minutes. It's a very complex.
And then afterwards there is time also for questions and discussion, and I would propose that we do that at that time. So let's give it a